My Democratic colleagues don't like me saying this. I think the two-party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind.
So let's start at the beginning. You know, when Biden didn't want his blonde-haired, blue-eyed children going to school with black kids.
In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation. He frequently spoke of blacks as, quote, an inferior race. On June 30th, 1977, Biden wrote, "Dear Mr. Chairman, I want you to know that I very much appreciate your help during this week's committee meeting in attempting to bring my anti-busing legislation to a vote." Then in 1978, Biden again asked Eastland to put his anti-busing bill before the full Senate, writing, "Your participation in floor debate would be welcomed."
And there is uniform opinion of those who testified that it is not a north-south, it's an urban-rural question, a distinction. And I happen to think that the one way to ensure that you set the civil rights movement in America further back is to continue to push busing, because it's a bankrupt policy.
It's supposed to be a free country.
It's getting in the country now that they're telling you to do this and do this now, and you won't even have no freedom.
Hey, nothing else. Let us go to our neighborhoods where our kids are safe. We want our kids safe. We want our children safe. And we never want to die. If I told you to shit, you wouldn't have. Niggas suck.
They were throwing eggs at the window and trying to hit people with them.
And there was like we was in school, there was throwing glass at black people and little kids.
What school was this again?
The Roger class.
This nigga bitch said that it's racist to force white kids to have to tolerate black kids just because we want more diversity. Because he said the following quotes.
Biden said, "What it says is, in order for your child with curly black hair, brown eyes, and dark skin to be able to learn anything, he needs to sit next to my blonde-haired, blue-eyed son. That's racist. Who the hell do we think we are, that the only way a black man or woman can learn is if they rub shoulders with my white child? I opposed busing. It's an asinine concept, the utility of which has never been proven to me," he said. "I've gotten to the point where I think our only recourse to eliminate busing may be a constitutional amendment. I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago. An African-American child is sent to a white school in a wealthy neighborhood, then, back to the ghetto. How can he be encouraged to love his white brothers? He doesn't need to look at the other side. He needs the chance to get out of the ghetto permanently," Biden said. "I do not buy the concept, popular in the 60s, which said, we have suppressed the black man for 300 years and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything our society offers. In order to even the score, we must now give the black man a head start, or even hold the white man back, to even the race," Biden told a Delaware-based weekly newspaper in 1975. "I don't buy that."
So after Biden tried to get in the way of integration, he decided, if I can't segregate from them, I might as well just throw them all in jail.
Not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. That's why we think the president should triple the commitment that he's made tonight for police, prosecutors, and judges for our cities and our states.
Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
And take them out he did with 1993's now infamous crime bill, backed by Bill Clinton.
President Clinton and Senator Biden at the time were right that the bill was significant.
The most significant federal effort to deal with violent crime in America
that funding literally paid states to increase the number of prison beds that they allocated for individuals convicted of violent crime in this country to serve 85% of their sentences behind bars. The reason that provision is so important and the reason we're still talking about it today is the federal government essentially subsidized states across the country to build more prisons.
The federal system, you serve 85% of your time. I remember when it was going on, when I was making these arguments in the late 70s, they used to call Biden's same time for the same crime provision. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate. But there is a consensus, and I will cease. A, we must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malefactor in society.
And this crime bill, of course, was a target towards Black people. They like to use the code word urban, but as you can see here from this graphic, it greatly increased Black and brown arrests, incarcerations, and the length of their sentencing was much longer. And we're going to get to why that was, because it's not simply that they don't like Black people. No, they want to profit off of Black people too.
La 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 la. Guess what, guys? So since the mass incarceration rate tripled throughout the past 20 years, since the 80s to the 90s to now the 2000s, for Black and brown, Latino, African American people, guess what? These major corporations that we all support all get their products packaged and shipped by prisoners. Yes, some of these prisoners get paid as low as 50 cents to $5 a week just so they can get commissary, so they can afford staying in prison, so that way they could buy their toilet paper and their water. And guess what? These companies profit off of prisoners. So why do you think slavery is still here? Also know that slavery still technically is legal just as long as you're being punished for it. According to the 13th Amendment, you legally can own a slave if they're being a prisoner. A legal prisoner, though. A legal prisoner. That's why prison systems work with corporations to have prisoners ship their products, package their products for cheap, like Whole Foods and Starbucks and Microsoft and so many other companies. Isn't that interesting how they don't teach us this in school? And y'all wonder why the incarceration rate for Blacks and Latinos is so high compared to whites. This was their way to make billions. And the prison industry is skyrocketing, booming in billions. And guess what? You can't run from it, because almost everything that's packaged and shipped in bulk is made and packaged by the prisoners in our American system. How fun.
So what's something that you always carry with you? Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You getting information right now? Hot sauce. Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to Black people.
Okay. Is it working?
You would think that after the 90s, watching how systematic racism actually played out, he would have learned his lesson, maybe educated himself, and started working for the correct side. No, that would be too much like right. Let's just take a look at Biden in modern times.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, Black kids, Asian kids. He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains. I've had a great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
I was disappointed by it, but I have to tell you, it brought back memories to me. It brought back memories of these Democratic politicians in the South who think they can go before black crowds and say one thing, that nobody else will hear it, and that they can somehow get a cheer in the room, and that they can blithely go on about their business.
In a conversation about how to deal with segregation in schools back in 1975, you told a reporter, "I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago." You said that some 40 years ago. But as you stand here tonight, what responsibility do you think that Americans need to take to repair the legacy of slavery in our country?
We bring social workers into homes of parents to help them deal with how to raise their children. It's not that they don't want to help. They don't know quite what to do. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. Make sure the kids hear words. A kid coming from a very poor school, or a very poor background, will hear 4 million words fewer spoken by the time they get there.
So apparently all black mothers and fathers need social workers to help us raise our children.
Question was about racial inequality in schools and, making up for pretty much longing discrimination or lasting discrimination, just for him to take it to a place it didn't need to be, which is essentially to showcase his unfortunate ignorance and implicit racism in the thought that black parents are failing, and that is why black students don't make it. It really just kind of shows us not only how Biden thinks, but also the fact that that's kind of his go-to. Let me see how I can disparage the black community. And the unfortunate part is a lot of people seem to be willing to overlook that.
And by the way, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
I think Joe Biden might be suffering from that same white entitlement and privilege and ego, where he's just that old school white male who feels like, hey man, they need me, I don't need them.
Against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards.
Better than anybody else. You don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. My state is anything from a northeast liberal state.
My son is Attorney General a year in Iraq, came back, and that's one of the things that he finds was most in need. When he was over there in Iraq for a year, people would come to him and talk about what was happening to them at home in terms of foreclosures, in terms of bad loans that were these Shylocks who took advantage of these.
Not the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. That's a storybook, man.
There's not a racist bone in my body.
Not a racist bone in my body. Not a racist bone in my body.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.